Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 21st of November, and joining me on this edition are assistant editor Steve Withers.
Why don't you wish in one hand and shit in the other? See which one fills up first.
And audio reviewer Ed Selly.
I beat the shit out of some kids today, but it was for a purpose. It made me feel good about myself.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Apologies for last week's no-show. We had a few technical issues. Unfortunately, we're unable to bring you a podcast last week, but we're here this week. We're hoping, fingers crossed, the solution that we now have. We've moved from Windows XP to Windows 7, so that's a bit of an upgrade. And we've found a recorder which hopefully is going to work with Skype properly. Like I say, this is the first podcast we've done with this new recorder. It may be that some things are loud. We might get clipping now and again and so on. Bear with us because we'll get to the bottom of these issues as we work through them over the next few weeks. But we're back again. Abnormal service resumed. And we were talking about it last week. And unfortunately, nobody got to hear what we were saying. But basically, all I can think about is C3PO, and we're all doomed.
Nah. There's very, very specific systems in place to prevent. You can't doom things overnight. I mean, I'm not saying that he can't do some significantly interesting and lively things, but he has, as a minimum, 4 years. But we've seen in the past with presidents, you essentially get 1 and a bit years of untrammeled power. Then there's the midterm elections that normally swings back against the incumbent. And then you're back into the electoral cycle again. So you can't hack off, and there's various arguments about, and that Trump has indeed lost the popular vote and so on and so forth, and it's down to the electoral college system. It doesn't take huge swings in a number of places for it for the game to go the other way, and it depends exactly how the Donald wishes to play this, but fundamentally, if you don't want to be turfed out on your ear after one term, you can't do a number of very, very radical things. I mean, the gentle backpedaling on Obamacare comes down to the fact that when it boils down to it, a number of people that voted for Trump are actually beneficiaries of it. And it's a case of, well, we could do everything that we said we're going to do, but actually, because people don't really think things through, the chances are that it'll be quite hacked off with us doing that in 4 years' time. So we'll just gently backpedal on what we're going to do, and the walls become a fence and all sorts of other things. So yeah. I wouldn't, don't get me wrong, it's still going to be a lively ride, but I don't, I might be wrong. We might see mushroom clouds, but in that case, what are you going to do about it? Can we take a nihilist perspective here? It is the one thing you, as an individual, can do precisely nothing about. So don't sweat it.
Okay, so there you go, world. Ed's put everything to rights, and you don't have anything to panic about with Donald Trump. Let's just say it trumped Brexit. That's all I'm going to say. They have no right to point the finger anymore.
Any more Top Trump? Why isn't anyone making Top Trump jokes? Because that must be obvious. Or is it just a certain age group that remembers Top Trumps?
I don't know. I do remember Top Trumps. I just didn't strike me that a card game played by children is the absolute basis for cutting.
I think a card game played by children is what we're going to have as a government for the next 4 years.
What we are, or the Americans.
Well, not us personally, obviously.
Yeah. That's the problem, you see. A lot of people think they're American, Steve. If you want some humour based around this, I did watch Frankie Boyle's thing, which is on iPlayer. It wasn't broadcast, but it is on iPlayer, talking about the US election, and it's very, very funny. That's my recommendation. The other thing is, we are recording this on the 18th of November, and the new Top Gear, the Grand Tour.
It's not Top Gear, dear.
It will always be Top Gear. It doesn't matter what they call it. It will always be Top Gear. I mean, with those three. I attempted to sit up last night to watch it at midnight, and probably round about 11:30 I was watching some documentary on BBC4. I must have dozed off because I woke up at 2 a.m. on the couch thinking, I'm giving up on this, I'm going to bed. So I haven't seen it yet.
Or you could have just watched it.
Wasn't available till the 18th.
When you woke up at 2 a.m. you could have watched it.
No, I couldn't. I was in no state to watch it at that point. I went to my bed. I'm getting too old to do this staying up late at night thing. That's what I'm trying to say.
The trailer looked pretty good. They seem to have chucked an infinite amount of cash at this program anyway.
But this is what happens. This is what happens when you're making a program that can show in 200 countries on the same day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a different world.
The thing they don't have to work on is the chemistry between the three of them. So they've got a head start on new Top Gear in that respect. So they are a threesome that everybody knows, and they know what they're doing. So it's all going to rely on the strength of the scripting, and it is scripted, and the situations that they find themselves in, and the content. Basically, the cars. They can't not drive cars, but if there's too much of the goofing around and challenges and all that kind of thing, it might be a bit too much. But at least they've got the chemistry going for them. Whereas BBC Top Gear last year was a disaster with Chris Evans. It took 3 or 4 episodes to really get going, and then when it really did get going, it was Matt LeBlanc and Chris Harris who really stood out as the two guys that should have been presenting it. And thankfully, going into season 2 of BBC Top Gear, that's going to be the case, along with Rory Reid. There's going to be the 3 of them presenting that, and that could work because there was a bit of chemistry between Rory and Chris Harris. So we might get 2 really good car programs out of it in the end.
Yeah, I mean, the script thing is interesting because they did eventually persuade Andy Willman, basically persuaded Richard Porter, who tweets as Sniff Petrol, has the Sniff Petrol blog, to come back in and do some work on the Grand Tour, that's a very positive thing because a lot of the sign-offs, a lot of the way that it flowed and moved is Porter, not any of the others. So that's a positive sign. And it's a very big loss to the BBC that he isn't doing any work for them. So we'll see how it goes. I have to relocate the Fire TV stick to the main television, which involves going down the back of my rack, which isn't pretty. So
you've only got it on one device. Christ, I've got it on the TV, on the Blu-ray player, on the UHD Blu-ray player, on a couple of boxes. It's like you kind of get away from it nowadays. So I'm surprised you've only got it on one device.
I've just got old tech. My GC60 doesn't have it natively. And there's nothing else plugged in, which is there. And the Fire TV stick normally lives connected to another television where it just broadcasts endless looped YouTube videos of Fireman Sam for my son. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Well,
I'm not 100% sure that my Prime subscription is still live. I'll check. I think it is.
Well, now that I've had to wait to see it, I'm probably going to set. I've got the Sony VW5500 in, which is a native 4K projector. It's in 4K. It might even be HDR. I don't know. I'll have to check that. But it's definitely in 4K, so I might just shove it on the big projector and watch it on that.
That'd be interesting.
I won't be.
Right, Ed. Cheer us all up with telling us what the current competitions are and what we can win.
All right, let me bring up the doodad. Sorry, I had the quote for Bad Santa up instead. Right, current competitions. You can currently win 1 of 3 copies of La Grande Vadrouille on Blu-ray, which is open to the 24th of November. So by the time you hear this, you'll need to get a shift on that. 1 of 3 copies of Roxanne on Blu-ray. That's open to all members until the 28th of November. And both of these competitions are open to residents of the UK, Ireland, and the Isle of Man. So those of you on Jersey and Guernsey will just keep needing to watch Bergerac reruns. Sorry. And you want to know about previous winners?
It'll save me asking the question, although I've now asked the question, haven't I? What are previous competition winners?
Right, it's really complicated. So we have previous winners BM Kev, Pat Q 1967 and Kilos won 1 million years BC on Blu-ray. A Prout, Mr. Slim and Simone 12345 won Alloys on Blu-ray. I'm pretty sure we've said that before. It just rings a bell.
Yes, at last week's aborted podcast recording.
Oh, yeah, you're right, yeah. So I've heard it before, but nobody else has. Congratulations. Jasmine, Blue Petros and a Nav Point won Gods of Egypt on 3D Blu-ray. Tarpot, Fifi Gabor and Crane 30 won Kez on Blu-ray. Some Billy Casper-tastic action there. Brumhi, Karma 12 and Shirkaby won Preacher Season 1 on Blu-ray. And Tony's 312, Mo 3733 and Spirit 131 have taken a trip back in time to watch Lucifer on DVD. Congrats to you all.
Yeah, congratulations to our winners there. Lots of competition winners, lots of competition prizes being won there. So let's move on to hardware news. And we were talking about Samsung buying up companies just a few months ago, Ed, on the podcast, and
less than that, weeks.
Was it just weeks? Was it? That's how my mind works in months. You see. So, but anyway, They have now eventually opened the purse and have bought Harman.
They have, yes, and not for an inconsequential sum of money either. This is, it follows on. I don't want to sound like a sage because I'm not. I did suggest that it was likely that we'd see an acquisition of this nature. As it happens, this is not perhaps exactly along the lines of what I was suggesting is going to happen, which is why I'm not a sage. This is largely aimed at the smart automotive end of proceedings because this is an area in which Harman Group is extremely strong. You may well have a vehicle which makes use of Harman International hardware and software, even if there's no visible branding to that effect. They are very active in providing car manufacturers with plug-and-play solutions for the center consoles that talk at you in robotic voices and pair your phones and things like that. And this appears to be the bit that Samsung are after. That they've also gained JBL, Revel, AKG and other bits and bobs. The early signs seem to be that they just sort of intend for that to carry on as before, really, rather than directly either harvesting any technology from it or significantly altering the directions it's travelling in. This, in terms of our little world, I don't think it's going to immediately and drastically change anything. On a wider level, it does mean that I think that Samsung are going to be more active in the automotive sector. And whether this is going to be something that combines with their existing understanding of VR, augmented reality, and other bits and bobs, and will end up with some very sophisticated offerings indeed, making their way into the automotive sector, I don't know. That would seemingly be what A, they're admitting to, and B, what the logical course of action for what they're doing. If as a side project they can produce a soundbar which uses JBL Pro drivers, so you end up with something that's roughly 6 feet long, 3 feet high, and weighs a couple of 100 kilos, I think that would be an excellent addition to the range. I think that has huge potential and will finally solve once and for all the problem of poor sound from flat screen televisions.
It is.
They can make it curved if they wanted.
It is quite a portfolio that they have purchased, though. There's a lot of big brand names in there, Ed. Yes,
no question. You are, as I say, obviously Harman, Kardon, AKG, JBL, Mark Levinson, Revel, and I'm sure there's another one. I can never remember. But yeah, the inference seems to be, certainly in the case of Mark Levinson, JBL Pro, and things like that, they have very established customer bases. They have an excellent reputation. They aren't going to be doing anything stupid with that. It's sort of innate. It ain't broke, don't fix it sort of things. They're after much more specific aspects of technology. But yeah, it gives Samsung access to some ferociously capable bits of audio equipment if the fancy takes them. But we don't know if it does or not yet.
Okay, so that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Moving on.
Sorry, can I just say something? I just thought of something that might be even more interesting because you know who makes the speakers and the audio solutions on LG's high-end TVs?
Harman Kardon.
Indeed. Perhaps not for much longer then.
I'll probably see out an existing agreement.
Yeah, obviously they've probably got a contract, but yeah, that'd be quite funny.
So moving on, UHD Alliance, they are now discussing Phase 2 of Ultra HD Premium, Steve. I've yet to see any of the badges displayed in any retailers that I've been in recently. The whole ethos of this alliance was to get behind a badge that would go in equipment so you knew it reached a certain standard, a la THX sort of thing. Yet to see it.
Yeah, it's... I'm not sure how successful it's been as a branding exercise, because as you say, I have seen it, obviously it's on boxes, on TV manufacturers' boxes, and you do see it on Ultra HD Blu-ray boxes, on some at least. I guess it wasn't helped by the fact that Sony almost immediately said they weren't going to use the logo, so that's great. But yeah, I think what's important about this is not so much the branding, although I think they will admit themselves that consumer awareness is important and consumer education is important. And hopefully that's an area where we help out by explaining various new technologies to consumers. But what is important is the idea of getting all the manufacturers, and not just the manufacturers. If you look at who's in the UHD Alliance, it is everybody that could in any way conceivably be involved in Ultra HD in some form or fashion is in their membership in one form or another. And there are different types of membership. Obviously, there are board members and associate members and this kind of thing. But everyone's in there, and that's got to be good because it means the industry is at least talking to each other and trying to reach a defined goal in some kind of sensible fashion. And I know a lot of people have complained about 4K and Ultra HD being rolled out piecemeal over the last couple of years, but I think that's just understandable because technology doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It is an evolutionary process, and manufacturers they can't just stop making TVs for 3 years until everything's perfect. Because they go out of business. So they have to sell things every year to keep in business. And so you bring these things out piece by piece. And obviously, it takes a long time for things like standards to be agreed. I mean, we're still, at this point, the standards for broadcast, for Ultra HD broadcast television is not fully finalised yet. So these things are still undergoing. There are recommendations, but the actual standards haven't been agreed. So they can't, you can't really build TVs to standards that haven't been agreed yet. So you can only do it based upon what you've got. And so that was phase one. Phase one addressed what was definitely agreed. So things like Ultra HD Blu-ray that had been finalised. They had a good idea about streaming internet and delivery over IP. So they've addressed certain issues in the first phase with things like setting a base set of performance for things like HDR. And for 10-bit, TV has to be able to accept a 10-bit signal. It has to be able to deliver HDR up to 1,000 nits, a minimum of 1,000 nits for Ultra HD Premium certification. You need to have 90% of DCI-P3 as a color space. These kind of things. Set a base level, which I thought was a very good idea. And although the branding associated with that hasn't necessarily been that successful, I think the idea behind it certainly is valid. And I met with them at IFA, which feels like an incredibly long time ago now, to talk about what's going on. And obviously, they talked about how successful they thought they'd been so far in terms of phase one. And then they started talking about phase two. And phase two is obviously going to be a bit trickier because, as I just said, I think certain standards have not actually been finalised yet. I think we've got a pretty good idea where we're going in Europe and in Asia, but in America it's still up in the air to a certain extent. But the idea with phase two is to take TV to the next level. So what they're really addressing is broadcast. They've done kind of IP delivery and Ultra HD Blu-ray. Now they've got to deal with broadcast, and that means certain factors. There's how do you deliver HDR as over a broadcast medium, and there are a number of different ways of doing that. There's solutions provided by Technicolor. There's a solution provided by Dolby as well. Dolby Vision does also apply to broadcast. But the front runner at the moment, certainly in Europe and in Asia, is the BBC and NHK's version, which is called hybrid log gamma, which basically combines two curves. It combines the standard curve, gamma curve that we would know and recognise from the past, with the high dynamic range curve with a much, much higher peak brightness. So you basically don't get washed out blacks on people who are watching HDR broadcast content on non-HDR displays. So it needs to be backwards compatible. It's obviously free as well because there's no licensing fees attached to it, and it looks like it's going to be a front runner. So they need to address that, how to take how to deliver HDR in terms of broadcast. There's also things like frame rate. So we were talking about higher frame rate a couple of weeks ago, and there's going to be at least 50, 60p. They are talking about 100, 120p as well. So they need to get that sorted out. So that's where they are in terms of phase two. It's taking Ultra HD from phase one, which was a base level, to a new level where it can also embrace broadcast television.
It's all interesting stuff, Steve, but it still feels rather like the Wild West out there when it comes to certain things like higher frame rate and HLG, hybrid log gamma and that kind of thing. And we are now end of 2016, going into 2017. We're only a few weeks away from CES. This is really taking its time, and I know there's lots of different people who have to talk to different alliances and different, standards bodies and all the rest of it. But you would think that we're now, 2 years into this, nearly 3 years into this, that they'll be getting on a bit more than they are.
Well, I know. I mean, like I said, it's a difficult process when standards when standards haven't been agreed yet. It's very hard to actually start developing a roadmap for your TVs if you don't even know what the standards are going to be in a year's time. It does make it difficult. You can only really address what you know for a fact. And I think what they're trying to do is, I mean, I know that they haven't necessarily confirmed it. Most of the manufacturers seem to be giving the impression that either that they would be able to, for example, add HLG as a firmware update. So that shouldn't be an issue. Higher frame rates is more of a problem. That will require different panels. But again, there's no actual announced way of delivering that yet. Possibly over IP would be the most obvious, but that's still up in the air. So I think they're trying to address it as fast as they can. But, you know, it's like you're getting 40 or 50 different companies, all with their own agendas and their own, end games, and also who obviously want their stuff to be used. And if you think about how Dolby want their equipment to be used or their technology to be used, and the other manufacturers or institutions like the BBC trying to do stuff as well, that all comes into play, and it is an incredibly complex process. And I do sympathise with the manufacturers in particular, who usually end up bearing the brunt of consumers' anger, because they could only, at the end of the day, do what they to build TVs to what is established and agreed. And if it hasn't been established or agreed yet, there's not much they can do about it. The same goes with things like people often talk about dynamic metadata, which is part of the Dolby app, the Dolby Vision, and can also be part of HDR10. But there is an issue possibly with delivering it over HDMI, and it may require HDMI 2.1. Again, the manufacturers are therefore at the mercy of HDMI to deliver an actual connection that works and they can use. So these things, it is a very complex chain of processes that are involved in getting any kind of TV or standard or anything like that into the market. And unfortunately, it does take time, and we're just living through a very tumultuous time in terms of TV technology. There's so much happening, so much changing, and I think it's changing pretty fast when you consider where we come from. But it is going to be another couple of years before we really get to the end result. Because you also can see manufacturers looking to try and widen colour spaces out, obviously increasing peak brightness. I mean, their end game has to be 4,000 nits and something that approaches Rec 2020 ultimately, along with higher frame rates and all the different versions of HDR. That's where we're going to get to, but it will take time to get there.
So the simple answer to my question was yes.
Yes. If you want to cut out the previous 5 minutes and just put in yes.
I jest. Yes, I mean, it is interesting. I guess we're going to get more answers in the next, 6 weeks till CES? 7 weeks?
Yeah, we should get there should be quite some interesting stuff at CES, I reckon.
Yeah, I'm
much
really
clearer picture.
Really looking forward to it this year. I think because I think we're sort of mid-term in terms of where we are with the technology. I think we're getting onto the exciting stuff now that the ground has been laid for 4K and UHD Blu-ray and that kind of thing. It's now to market. There's now enough 4K TVs out there to have a really nice base. This is where it starts to get really interesting with, like you say, hybrid log gamma and other things like higher frame rates, and finally getting to DCI-P3 for a lot of manufacturers and maybe even beyond that. Although I wouldn't imagine we're going to be anywhere close to 2020 this time around, but who knows? They could be pushing that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're right when you said earlier about it being a bit of the Wild West at the moment. I would like to see more sort of agreement amongst manufacturers on how to actually implement HDR10, because everyone seems to be doing their own version of it because it is open source. They can, implement it the way they like, and they are. I'd like to see them all get together and actually agree a more standardized approach to HDR10, because obviously that's one of the big benefits of Dolby Vision, because it's a single manufacturer or single technology, and therefore they do control that, and it is all implemented in a very specific and uniform way. And it would be nice to see the manufacturers do a bit more of that on the other side of the coin. But we'll see what happens at CES. Yeah,
looking forward to it. Like I say, it's going to be interesting this time. You're right. Another technology that's moving along at the same time as 4K is coming into the home. We're definitely getting more and more in terms of connected wireless speakers, and I was looking back at a lot of the reviews that I've done recently, and almost everything bar the projectors I've reviewed recently is now online in one way or another. It has wireless, or it has a proprietary system on it like MusicCast or Hios or something like that. So we're definitely, Ed, moving into the realms of connected home as we move into 2017.
Yes, this is absolutely the case. It's one of those things where it's been on the wish list for consumers, and manufacturers have been trying to provide it for over a decade now, but we are finally at the point where it can be made to work reliably under normal domestic conditions, and it is starting to make some have to apply some traction, and I think it goes hand in hand with there finally being sort of a purpose and a point to it. We are, it was all very well having multiple speakers and points of audio in a house, but it's of no real worth whatsoever when all you were doing is putting a CD on in one room and then listening to it in a different room. That had it was, if you like, it was an interesting technical exercise, but it had very little tangible benefit to the end user. Now, as you say, you've got AV receivers which are sitting online. So if software comes down, they can sort it out, they can update it. There's no messing about with RS-232 and other exciting legacy connections, and they are able to access streaming services. Your television gets hold of on-demand content. Well, at least you guys do. Mine dates back to the year dot, so it doesn't do that quite so effectively. And it's starting to be worthwhile to actually make devices communicate with one another, because the content that is available to each and every device is higher, and then being able to shunt that around to make best use of it suddenly makes an enormous amount of sense. And then this dovetails neatly with the fact that even if you're using the supplied router with that you got with your broadband contract, all but the most terrible of those are actually up to the job of supporting a reasonable transfer of data and information between a couple of points in a household.
Yeah, I agree, Ed. It's definitely an interesting time in terms of. I mean, did you see that only this week Amazon have launched their unlimited music service, which ties in with the success of their Echo and Dot wireless speakers with voice control. I think Samsung have been making a big deal about the Internet of Things. They were at CES at the beginning of this year, and I'm sure every manufacturer will be making more of a big deal of it. I mean, everything's becoming more connected. Obviously, there are risks attached to this, because we might have Russians turning on our kettles and making us listen to music we don't want to listen to remotely from somewhere in somewhere in Vladivostok or something. But I mean, it does. I embrace it in one aspect. I think, yes, it's. I like the technology. I like the fact you can do so much. You can listen and control things, and multi-room systems are great because you can listen in one room and then go to another room and listen to music in the next room, and that's all very well and good. But I always find that the more complex a system is, the more likely it is something's going to go wrong.
I don't even think it needs. I don't even think it needs to be that complex. I think it just needs to be using the technology as it is. It can get really annoying. I mean, an example for me is I use Bluetooth quite a bit when I'm in the car from my phone. But my phone's always in my pocket, and if I get in the car and it doesn't register, and it does this now and again where it just will not register, I can't be. I just can't be bothered to go in and pick up my phone and open the phone and sign into Tidal and then connect to offline and all the rest of it. It's when the stuff doesn't work, that's when it becomes a case of it becomes a hassle. When it works, it's absolutely brilliant. When it just works, when you open up the app for an AV receiver and you choose the NAS drive and it just works, fantastic. But 9 times out of 10, it's not as easy as that.
It's interesting because I think even since you took delivery of your car, I think there's been another jump, because it's interesting. When I was last in Ireland, the time before this year, it was a VAG-based hire car. We'll leave it at that. We're not plugging or slagging. And it worked. It connected with my phone most of the time, exactly like you were describing there. This time around, a 16-plate car from a different manufacturer, must be said, and it worked 100% of the time. Every time I sat in it, it just got on with it, and off it went. And the voice prompting and voice command stuff all actually did exactly what they were supposed to do. I think it's incremental, and I do agree with you that under many circumstances, especially once people are trying to do multi-video, that is still something of a challenge in terms of latency and bandwidth and all sorts of different things. But I think that there's been further incremental gains in how these systems work in the last 12 to 18 months, which really are, if you like, it's exactly what you were saying there. It's just the difference between it being something that works on a level of reliability that you actually forget about it, and then it just becomes a part of your day-to-day existence. And I think that the final improvements in this regard are being made at the moment. It depends on a number of other things.
It has to come that it's easy, because at the minute, I mean, certainly, for me, if I have to repair something, and I mean pair something up again, whether that be a phone or whether it be a wireless speaker with an AVR or whatever, if you have to constantly go through that every time you want to use it, and then the novelty wears off, and you think, oh, to hell with it, I'm just going to turn the volume up and I can hear it in the other room, rather than feeding it through to another speaker. You know what I mean? That's how people think, though, isn't it? And that's how people work. If it doesn't work, or you have to, every time you have to go through a setup routine to use it, then it won't get used. If it's a case of it just works, and this is where Apple have always been strong, is stuff just works, and it works the way it's supposed to work, and it works every time that you try and use it, then that should be the end goal. And I think once we get to that point where the reliability is there, I think the market is huge for these wireless speakers and music cast systems and HEOS systems and that kind of thing. And I don't think it has to be proprietary either. I think because you can use stuff like Bluetooth and so on, it doesn't matter what make or model it is of wireless speaker that you're using throughout the house or whatever. And then when you get onto the applications as well and the apps, it's really quite clever what you can do on these things now. So you could have a full multi-room setup that in the past would have cost you tens of thousands of pounds to do it through a custom installer. You could do it now with a few wireless speakers and an application for a couple of £100.
Yeah, They're getting really, I must admit, because I've just recently reviewed a couple of AVRs with multi-room built in, so a Yamaha with MusicCast and a Denon with HEOS. They're slick. They're very easy to set up. In fact, in the case of the Denon HEOS, I didn't do anything. I already had it set up for another HEOS speaker. I just opened the app and the receiver was already there. It had already set itself up for me. So they're getting really slick and effective and simple to use. And I particularly like Yamaha's approach in the sense that they put a MusicCast into pretty much all their products now. So you can actually build a multi-room system without even trying. Just through natural growth or by default, you end up with a multi-room system, and they do work. They are robust, and you can control different devices from one app. The Denon one's great because you can actually go between the HEOS app and the actual remote app by pressing a button. It's a little icon, and you can flip between one or the other. So you can control your AVR with the remote app, or you can flick into HEOS and control everything in the house from that one app. So they've really moved on in the last couple of years, maybe even in the last year, in fact. They've moved on quite a bit in terms of their functionality and ease of setup, because they weren't always that easy to set up, but these two particularly are very simple to set up, and I like that.
Yes, I mean, I think one thing that has made a big difference, the early front runner in terms of turning theoretical ability into something that was of real world use was Sonos. But Sonos got ahead of the game in the early days by actually using a mesh network system. So it was all self-reinforcing, and it piggybacked to your existing wireless network. It didn't rely on it, and that meant it was exceptionally stable. But it then encouraged everyone else to up their game. But actually, it's left Sonos slightly high and dry because their system is so tied into itself. It doesn't really play nice with other people. Whereas now, as you say, if everything's just on DNLA, you can actually sort of mix and match, not as cohesively as you could if you go whole house with one brand, but you can mix and match components and have them starting to talk to each other and do similar things. And that is, that in many ways is of greater interest and excitement because, much as I have a lot of time for Yamaha, I have a lot of time for Denon. I don't necessarily want a house exclusively full of their gear.
Yeah, that's always been the thing for me, is having to go with one brand, whether it be Sonos or another proprietary system. So I think, like you say, if we're now getting to the stage where we can mix and match, I think it's better for all manufacturers if that's the case, because then it doesn't really it doesn't really matter what system you have. You can go and mix and match with other manufacturers, and it should all work together.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. And as I say, Bluetooth is a big driver for that. But nonetheless, the whole just standard network protocol is helping in a big way in this regard as well. And yeah, when it's something that you're not consciously paying extra for, and it turns up and it works reliably, that's the breakthrough moment for members of the public that aren't committed technophiles. So hopefully onwards and upwards from here.
Excellent. So let's move on swiftly because we're up against it already in terms of time. Back to TVs, and Steve's had another Hisense TV in. Steve, any good?
Yeah, I've got to say I was really impressed with this TV. We saw our first Hisense. I think it was this time last year. It was the XT9 910, which I thought showed early promise. Definitely had some great features. It had a few issues. And it was clearly trying to sort of copy a Samsung TV too much, I think. This TV, though, is very much its own TV. It doesn't necessarily look like anything else. It's been beautifully designed by Hisense. It's £1,299, so it's not expensive for a 65-inch edge-lit LED Ultra HD 4K TV, but with local dimming. But it's really, really well made. I mean, it's solidly built. Metal construction, lovely brushed metal back panel, brushed metal finish on the bezel on the sides. I mean, it doesn't look at all like any kind of budget product. It really feels well made. It's got this sort of what's currently quite trendy feet-based stand, so you're going to need quite a wide surface to position on unless you wall mount. But you look at it, get out of the box, and it's really heavy, and you think, okay, this doesn't feel like this isn't a budget. I mean, it may be a relatively budget price, but it doesn't feel like a budget product. And then you put it on, and picture quality was excellent. Backlight uniformity was really good, which was impressive because the previous TV I'd reviewed, which was the M5500, unfortunately, that was a good, solid TV, but was marred by some patchy backlight. This had a nice, even, uniform backlight. The picture accuracy, color accuracy was very good. Out of the box, pretty good. Very good after calibration. Same with the grayscale. Gamma was a bit over the shop. They still haven't quite nailed down their gammas yet. They're a little bit of a movable feast sometimes. But otherwise, it delivered a really nice picture. And it also, although it's not the brightest TV for HDR, it does support HDR, and it can deliver about 300 nits, so it's not that bright. But it does deliver a pretty accurate color gamut, much better than a lot of other manufacturers. So that was impressive as well. And you got a really good HDR performance out of it. You didn't have quite the impactful peak highlights, but you got a nice color accuracy. You've obviously got the increased resolution. And I thought it was a really good TV. It delivered in all the areas it wanted it to at that price point. It did it very well. It sounded good. It had some nice speakers built into it. And, for a 65-inch TV with all the features included, and it's got a nicely designed remote control. It's got a simple smart platform, but it does what you need it to do. And I quite like simple platforms. I basically don't want to be messing around with things too complicated. You want to just see the things you want to see and get on with it. And it does that. I thought it really delivered, and I was genuinely impressed. And I think they've come a long way in a year, and this was an absolutely cracking telly, especially for the money.
Is it something you would recommend over the more established brands? Well,
at that price point, the closest you'll get would be the Samsung, the KS7000. That's a flat screen HDR TV. Better HDR on that TV, definitely. It's £300 more, though. And I've got to say, build-wise, I'd say the Hisense is superior in that sense. So you're going to really struggle to find a TV that delivers this level of quality at that price point. In fact, I don't think you could. So yeah, would I recommend it if you're tight on budget and you're looking for something under $1,500 and you want a big screen size? Definitely, this should be on your shortlist. Absolutely, no question about it.
I thought you were going to say if you're tight.
No, everyone's got a lot of money to spend, and they're looking for something that's going to deliver performance, and they want a nice big screen as well, and they want all the other features that come with it. The Hisense can do it.
Yeah, good stuff. So that review will be up on the site by the time this podcast goes out. So we're going to do upcoming reviews. Now, normally we do this at the beginning of the month, but we forgot when we did the podcast on the 7th. Then last week we had that disaster where we just didn't have a podcast. So we're now middle of the month. But we'll still do the upcoming reviews. So coming up for the rest of the month from me, I have the Epson TW7300 projector. I also have the Sony VW5500 4K projector, and Yamaha's A3060 AVR, which I've had for a number of weeks now. And Very impressive stuff. So those are coming from me. Ed?
Literally, as of this morning, as we're recording this podcast, the latest offering from Q Acoustics is up on the site, which is a 2.1 system. Incorporating its own amplification and decoding. So have a look through that, see what you think. Last up for my November reviews will be a turntable from Pioneer DJ, the PLX 500. Does it work as a home turntable? That's actually quite a sort of unusual review, because you'll have to take on board what it says and make a decision based on my findings as to whether it's sort of for you or not. Because the answer, I suppose, without giving too much away, is out of the box, it's good but not great. But there's more to it than that. So you'll have to see what you think. I'm cracking on with December's ones. We're heading inexorably towards the end of the month, so it's time to get working. You should be able to see after that. I've got a speaker package from British pro audio brand ATC. We have a little something from Technics, and then Chord Electronics have sent us an amplifier which no one else has ever seen before, and it looks absolutely spectacular. So I shall have to try and dig my latent photography skills out to try and get that across. And who knows, there may even be video to go with it as well. I may have to overcome my crushing fear of that sort of thing and crack on with it. So that's where we are for me.
Well, you're going to have to do that before CES, aren't you?
I know,
really.
I know. Yes, all right.
For anybody that doesn't know, Ed's going to be doing his own video diaries, his own vlogging from CES, as he's a virgin of the show.
I'm a 36-year-old married man. I think vlogging, I had assumed at this point that vlogging had passed me by, but you know.
But you were wrong.
I was wrong, dead wrong.
The vlogging virgin.
The camera equipment for CES showed up earlier this week. So Phil was treated to a barrage of me sending Skype messages going, it doesn't work. Eventually I got it to work. It's quite benignly complicated, but it's complicated nonetheless. So there's a fairly steep learning curve between now and setting foot in the convention centre in January. So I don't look like, I don't come across as someone who has never ever done this before. But you know, there's a plan in action, and we're going to be working on it. So watch this space.
I'm looking forward to it, and thanks to CVP who provided we're using Osmo Pluses, which are gimbal cameras. So no more of Steve shaking cameras.
Parkinson cam.
I didn't want to say that, but yes. And hopefully no more need to carry heavy tripods around and all the rest of it. So Steve will be relieved, because that was his, other than standing in front of the camera, that was his other job, was to heave around the heavy equipment. So you'll be pleased to hear that now, Steve. There's only like 6 battery packs now to carry around, and rucksacks and all the rest of it. So looking forward to it. Right, moving on. Steve, have you got anything that you're going to review this month?
I do, yes. So the M7000 we just mentioned, that was collected yesterday and replaced by the K5510, which is, at least spec-wise, appears very similar to the M5500 that I reviewed quite recently. But we'll see in testing, see how that turns out. I can say one thing for certain: I've already set it up, and backlight uniformity is much better on this TV than it was on the one before, which is good news. Also getting towards the end of the month, I'm getting the Marantz SR7011 9-channel AV receiver for review. I've got a pair of upward-firing Atmos speakers. Well, I've got four Atmos-firing upward speakers to test, two pairs basically, by PSB that look very interesting. If you're looking to add Atmos without putting speakers on your ceiling. And also, hopefully, and this isn't guaranteed yet, but hopefully by the end of the month, we should also be getting in the Philips OLED TV, which has been delayed a little bit, and also the Oppo Ultra HD Blu-ray, which again has been delayed a little bit, but they should be in by the end of the month, or at least early December at the latest.
Okay, and as well as the reviews towards the end of the month, we're going to start doing our Best Buys of the year as well. So if you want to know what our selections are for the best TVs, best 4K TVs, basically the best equipment that we've seen this year in terms of review-wise, and that does include Ed's hi-fi stuff as well. Stay tuned to the homepage for those Best Buy guides as they go up towards the end of the year. Give you some inspiration for Black Friday or more for the January sales. I would have thought. You tend to get better deals, I think, at the January sales. I know Black Friday was a big thing a couple of years ago, but really seems to have died on its arse these last few years.
Yeah, it's more Cyber Monday now, isn't it? If we can just do it online on Monday rather than...
Well, it's not just that. It's no longer just one day, Steve. I mean,
it's like
Amazon's Black Friday thing started last week. It's like, it used to be just one day. I think there was a lot of backlash to those press setup scenes that we saw a few years ago where people fighting over Polaroid TVs and that kind of thing on the news. There was a lot of backlash from that, and I think it's had a negative effect, I think, and I don't think Black Friday is as big as it used to be. Ed?
It's never been a big thing for me anyway, but yes, it was, we don't do sort of obsessive fighting over products and stuff like that. So we just sort of looked at it and went, oh, ghastly, and left it at that. I will say I have, on 2 separate occasions, benefited from Cyber Monday deals. So sometimes interesting things crop up there. And I'll be keeping an eye this time round as I'm umming and ahhing whether this laptop on which I'm speaking to you now is up to the job of going to Nevada in 2017 or whether I'll be replacing it. So I'll be interested to see if anything crops up there on the Monday.
Yeah,
so we'll see what happens.
I've never seen MacBooks turn up on those kind of deals.
Well, no, but that's not what I'm looking for. They don't have enough holes for starters. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm in an unusual position. I detest both. There are elements of both operating systems I detest. With that being the case, I'll go for the one that allows me to spend money on things I don't detest. It's as simple as that. It's not anything more sophisticated than that sort of line of thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's time to talk about films now, so we'll be back in a second with movie news. Now, had this been last week and it worked, we were going to talk about probably what's the best sci-fi film of the year, Steve, in terms of Arrival, sorry.
Arrival, yes. Arrival has arrived. Yeah, I did see Arrival in time for last week's podcast. Unfortunately, we couldn't record it. But yeah, I loved Arrival. It's an absolutely fantastic film. It's intelligent sci-fi. It's an adult film made for grown-ups. And that's a refreshing change these days. It's full of really interesting ideas. It's got a great screenplay, a really interesting story, fantastic performances throughout, some really good effects. It's directed by Denis Villeneuve, who also made the excellent Sicario and Prisoners, and is currently making the Blade Runner sequel, which bodes well for that. And it was a real gem. I absolutely loved it. So if you haven't seen it, go and see it. It's fantastic. And also the other good news is it's coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray quite soon. A big 2 thumbs up from me on that film.
Okay.
Definite 9 out of 10.
Cool. So films this Friday.
Yeah, this Friday we've got an interesting selection of movies opening up. We've got Allied, which is the new Brad Pitt movie. Robert Zemeckis directing, and also co-stars Marion Cotillard. It's basically a World War II set drama where he's an American and she's a French woman, and they get married, and they are basically spies. And there's based upon the trailer, there's a question whether she might actually be a German spy masquerading as his wife, and so he has to find out the truth. And it looks good and it looks interesting in the trailers. Shireen actually saw it last night, so there will be a review up early next week. Also, we've got Creepy, which is a Japanese horror film that Shireen has also seen, and we'll have the review up early next week. And incredibly, 13 years after the film we were quoting from at the beginning of this podcast, we have Bad Santa 2, more of Billy Bob Thornton playing the world's worst Santa Claus. So expect lots of strong language, very offensive material, and his Kathy Burke playing his mum, who I did see in the trailer, which was quite funny because he looks up and sees her, immediately punches her in the face. Then she goes, "Yeah, you still hit like your father," which I thought was quite funny. Yeah, I will admit that the Bad Santa is one of my sort of guilty pleasures, so I'll probably go and see Bad Santa 2 at some point.
Right, let's move on swiftly. Blu-rays coming out next week. Blu-rays coming out this week.
Yeah, Blu-rays coming out this week. It's quite a big week for Blu-rays. We've got some quite big titles. Star Trek Beyond comes out this week. Also comes out on Ultra HD Blu-ray as well, although I think it's actually the week after on Ultra HD Blu-ray, but definitely coming out on both formats. You saw the film in the summer, as did I. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was great fun.
Best track film they've made so far.
Yeah. It was more like the series. It was entertaining, and I thought the cast are really gelled, and they're really into their groove now. And I thought it had a decent villain, and I thought J-Lar was quite an interesting and new addition to the characters. And I thought the effects and direction were exciting and well done as well. So it's a great Ultra HD Blu-ray if you want to get it in that format. I'm sure it'll be excellent. I mean, I've watched bits of the Blu-ray as well, and that looked really good. So Dolby Atmos soundtrack on both discs. Fantastic film. If you're a Trek fan, I'm sure you'll be getting it. And if you're not, I still think it's worth checking out. Ghostbusters. This is interesting. Coming out on Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray in the UK. It came out on Ultra HD Blu-ray and Blu-ray in the States a few weeks ago. I've got the US release of the Ultra HD Blu-ray. In the States, it came out as Sony did a really nice package. It was the Ultra HD Blu-ray, the 3D Blu-ray, and a Blu-ray. In this country, it looks like it's the Ultra HD Blu-ray, the Blu-ray, 2D Blu-ray, and also a Blu-ray of bonus features. So you're not getting the 3D disc included, which is a bit annoying. Otherwise, though, regardless of your thoughts on the film, and I kind of enjoyed the film. I know it's had a bad rap, and there's been some criticism of it.
I was the same. I mean, as long as you don't think about it too much, it's a Saturday night popcorn fest, basically.
Yeah. I mean, in his review, Simon's quite harsh on it, but it made me laugh in places. I never thought the original Ghostbusters was particularly good, so I don't have any particular love or affection for that. It was funny in places. I thought Kate McKinnon was excellent in it, and the effects are really good, and certainly the discs look fantastic. It does a weird thing though. If you do watch it in 3D, the 3D effects actually come beyond the black borders of the 2.35 to 1 image. So if you're watching on a aspect ratio screen with masking, you won't really see this. But if you're watching on a 1.85 to 1 screen or a TV, you will actually get this effect where, goes zoom out of the screen and then beyond the screen, if you know what I mean. So it kind of enhances the 3D effect. That effect is on all the versions, so not just the 3D version, but also the 2D version. It's a bit pointless on the 2D version, but it's kind of fun on the 3D version. Now, it looks and sounds great.
Steve, the problem here is that there's the extended edition, which hasn't been getting very good reviews for the added scenes in there. Was that the version that Simon has reviewed?
Yes. So he might well be criticising it because there's more stuff in there.
Yeah, I think so, because I think the theatrical cut is nice and tight, and there's not a lot of silliness in there, and it's really quite funny, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. Whereas I'm hearing the extended version is very much adding a lot of stuff in that is not great.
Yeah, there's a couple of dance scenes that were really unnecessary in the extended version. I think there are 4 dance scenes in total, which 2 are in the final cut, but original cut. But it seemed like unnecessary. I think anyone was crying out for a longer version of Ghostbusters. All I can say is, in terms of picture and sound, it's got Dolby Atmos soundtrack as well. Again, on the Ultra HD Blu-ray at least. It looks and sounds great. So if you're looking for some eye candy kind of films, or you're just curious and want to see it, it's just worth getting. And like I say, like you said, Phil, I did enjoy it for what it was. Also coming out, the BFG, the new Spielberg film based on Roald Dahl's story, of course. This is a Blu-ray release this week, and I have not seen the BFG yet, but I do quite fancy it because Mark Rylance is a fantastic actor, and his performance as the giant looks really interesting the way they did it with motion capture and
animation. It's the only Spielberg film I haven't gone to the cinema to see.
Oh. My wife did and loathed it.
Right. Okay.
As an aside.
There you go.
We are both enormous fans of the book. Big parts of both of our childhood, and it just, if you like, it manages to do all of the parts of the book quite technically proficiently, but without any of the sense of magic or wonder or actual Roald Dahl about it at all. So yeah, it's just, if you like, technically proficient, utterly soulless. I mean, Steve will buy it because there'll be a 4K Blu-ray of it. So
no, there won't be. There won't be. It's Disney.
Oh yes, of course.
There is a strong rumour though that Disney are now thinking about it.
Yes, I have read that it looks as though what they had said from the beginning was that they were waiting to see how the market played out. As I was going to talk about in a minute, it's been relatively successful. So the rumours are now that they are looking to enter the Ultra HD Blu-ray market in the new year. I would hazard a guess they might make some announcement at CES if they do.
Yeah, that'd be good if they did that.
That would be good news. And then also we've got 2 Criterion discs coming out this week. We have Punch Drunk Love, easily the best the best Adam Sandler movie ever made, by Paul Thomas Anderson, and also Akira Kurosawa's Dreams, which was one of his later films before he died. Not one of his best, but certainly interesting. And both of those come out on Criterion in the UK. I think they're same time as they come out in the States, actually, so that's good news. And that's also out this week.
Excellent. So that's a Blu-rays for this week. UHDs, I actually went and bought 2 the other day.
Ooh, what did you buy?
I bought 3.
Ooh.
Just not at the same time. So I bought, what do you call it, Deadpool?
Okay, excellent.
Finally got hold of Deadpool. And then I got Revenant and Independence Day Resurgence. Or Regurgence.
I'd be very interested to see what you think of that.
Have you been to the cinema?
No, I haven't seen it at all, so...
No, but have you been to the cinema? Have you made use of your Unlimited card?
Oh, what, this month?
Yeah.
No. Not yet. Not yet. I'm actually
Odeon
hoping...
must love you.
I'm actually...
in the bank. No services rendered.
Well, you see, the thing is, at the minute, Ed, I've got 2 projectors in for review, so it kind of, I have to spend my time doing that, and I don't know what it is, but I can't sit and... I can sit and do testing and that during the day, but I can't sit and watch a movie during the day. I don't know what it is. It's just something in me. It has to be an evening time to watch a movie. I don't know what it is. It's just something in my brain that says that. So once I get these projectors out of the way, I am going to go and see Arrival. I'm going to go and see Inferno before it disappears. And what was the other one I was going to go and see? Doctor Strange.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's quite good.
I'm going to go and grab that. So there's 3 that I want to go and see. It's just finding a day where I'll probably do it next week, where I'll just take an afternoon off and just go and blitz it, probably. So that'll pay for it. Yeah, I'm going to need it. The thing is, come December the 15th, December 16th, it's going to get abused, this Unlimited card. So... just so you know.
Seeing the same film over and over again.
Yep, probably. I don't know if you saw the little teaser featurette thing. Yeah, there was some shots in there that was like, oh my god.
It's interesting. That featurette, it was a very strong, very clear effort on their part to identify exactly what the film is and when it's set and what it's about in that little featurette. And I think that's partly in response to audience responses to trailers in the cinema. People have been going like, where's BB-8? Where's Ray? What's going on? People, obviously, we understand what it is. But those out there who went to see The Force Awakens, who are not Star Wars fanatics and didn't grow up with it and have no idea, and probably maybe haven't even seen Star Wars, those people haven't got a clue. And so it's interesting that Disney are starting to think, okay, we need to make it clear what this actually is before it opens in December.
Do you think that'll be the whole scroll at the start? Well, there's a thing. Will there be a title scroll at the beginning? I
don't know if there will be, actually, because it's not. It's different. They have to do something. They have to do it a different style because it is meant to be not part of the.
And anyway, if they do the title scroll, the whole scroll is going to be explaining the fact that this is before the first Star Wars, and Darth Vader's in it though.
Yeah, it's Darth Vader, isn't it? I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. And I like the fact that it looks so. It really looks different, doesn't it? I mean, it still looks like a Star Wars film. There was some quite nice where they cut between shots from Star Wars.
Yeah, there was the Yavin base and the cut between the original film and their set, and it looks identical.
Yeah, they rebuilt it exactly. So that's interesting. But it still has a nice feel to it. That it looks like. What's his name? Gareth Edwards has at least tried to bring something new to the environment. Whereas, and I listened to J.J. Abrams' commentary track on Force Awakens, and he's, he talks about it as being, there are certain beats you expect in a Star Wars film, and they deliberately did certain things and repeated certain things. But, it did feel too unimaginative, too slavish, too much like Star Wars. It didn't feel original in any real sense. This feels a lot more original, even though it's obviously a very specific story set within the universe, and we know roughly what's going to happen, I guess, because it's in the crawl. But it had a nice look to it, and an interesting cast too.
Yeah, I thought. And the thing is, you don't know what's going to happen. you know what the final outcome is, but you don't know if any of these characters actually make it to the end. So, there's lots of possibilities in there.
Considering we don't see any of them in any of the other films, I'm guessing they're not going to last.
But then would they appear in the other films? Because they're only a section, like you say, it's like a story in the same universe, but not quite in the same focus. So maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's going to be interesting. We're not going to take up any more of the podcast time because I know certain people.
I just replied to a couple of emails. Right. Do you know what? I'm sure I am. I don't want to come across as a downer. I am excited. I just don't need to discuss it ad infinitum. I mean, not when there's MasterChef to break through. I mean, last night's MasterChef, that would have been Thursday the 17th. It was a quarter final. And it was, I tell you what, that was compelling television. We had someone go from the height of triumph to the depths of despair in 1 hour of tight BBC filmmaking. BBC is earning its license fee for this one. It's beautifully edited. I mean, whoever does the sound for it is a genius, is a god. And yeah, it's great. And you guys have got Star Wars to witter on about. I'm just hoping that you'll have watched it sufficiently early on in the cycle that by the time I'm trapped on an aeroplane with you for half a day, that we have other things to do. I mean, I'm hoping that we'll be all business and we can discuss all sorts of, what we're doing and things like that. Because talking about the minutiae of, whether they were wearing, absolutely type correct Rebel Alliance underpants is not going to be blowing my frock up. So, we'll see where we go from there.
Don't worry, Ed, I'll ignore you for 11 hours.
I'm good at being ignored, mate. Don't have a problem with that.
Right, can I get on with my Ultra HD Blu-ray roundup?
I suppose.
Okay, so announced discs, I've already mentioned Arrival. Also coming soon is Deepwater Horizon, The Girl on the Train, Magnificent Seven, and Storks. So some cracking titles there. And I was going to mention this last week, but obviously we aborted the podcast recording, but it's been quite successful in terms of its launch. It was announced, I think, 2 weeks ago that over 1 million Ultra HD 4K discs have been sold so far. This is in the States, but that's good sales numbers for a new format. By the end of the year, there'll be over 100 titles in the States. Again, good numbers for a new format. And by the end of the year, there'll be over 100,000 standalone players sold, and that's not even including Xbox One S numbers, because obviously that includes an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. So in terms of its launch, it's been more successful than Blu-ray. Admittedly, it's not in the middle of a format war with another format, but I think Ultra HD Blu-ray has exceeded expectations in terms of its performance in its first year, and that almost certainly is one of the reasons why Disney is now talking about entering the market, because it has done well, and that's good news, although expensive news for me.
Good stuff. So that wraps up our look at the films, and we're going to finish on a note which has been quite interesting this year. The Simpsons. So they accurately predicted a President Trump, but they weren't aiming out to actually predict that, were they, Steve? It was more a case of they were looking for the most
ridiculous
person to think of to be president before Lisa was president, and they had the President Donald Trump. That has come true, and one of the spooky things is that footage on the escalator, where he's waving and the sign drops behind him and that kind of thing, and then you look at actual footage from this year's campaign where he is on an escalator and the sign drops down, and it's almost, the timing is just almost the same. It's really weird when you see it.
They also show a map of his election victory, and they got it absolutely spot on in terms of the states that voted for Trump.
It's not actually spot on if you take a closer look at it, but it's almost bang on. Yeah. And the other thing was Back to the Future. So they predicted that the Chicago Cubs would win the World Series. Now the Chicago Cubs haven't won the World Series in 108 years. So this is why it was used as a joke within the Back to the Future 2 film, the Cubs win when he goes to 2015, because it was seen as, the curse of the goat or whatever it was. The Cubs would never win. Now it was a year out, but still, to sit back then and say the Cubs are going to win, and then, just to be 12 months out with your prediction, again, that's spooky.
It's what's quite worrying is that a lot of these predictions that are coming true haven't been a film trying to predict the future, but more of a film that's just trying to think of the most ludicrous thing they could think of for the future as a joke, and then we have it come true. That's a bit worrying. Because if you look at films that try and predict the future, say it's like 2001, for example. I mean, as with most science fiction films, they tend to say more about the period they're made in than they do about the future they're trying to predict. And 2001 was a good example where, obviously it's in the height of Apollo. So they're talking about moon bases and space stations and going to Jupiter and manned missions to the far reaches of the solar system. And it's all very, very optimistic. Because at the time, that's what we thought we were going to be doing. If you look at the 70s movies, when everything starts to go to shit, they're much more dystopian and they're not looking forward in that kind of optimistic way. And someone like Escape from New York, for example, that New York is very much New York of 1981. It was a bit of a hellhole. The idea of just walling it in and turning it into a prison was probably a pretty good idea at the time. Now New York's very nice. Most of it's lovely. It's all lattes and street entertainers. So
hipsters.
Things haven't turned out. Yes, it's full of wall-to-wall hipsters. So things haven't really turned out the way necessary. So when they try and predict the future, I think they often are wildly inaccurate in most respects. Certainly 2001, unfortunately, missed the mark heavily in terms of in terms of space travel. At least it did have things like telecommunications and video conferencing and that kind of thing, which did become true. And also, there's quite a nice scene where they're having the astronauts are on the Discovery and they're eating some food, and they are watching what I can best describe as tablets. They're watching TV on tablets. And that at least was one minor thing that they did get right. But I guess of all the most recent films that have tried to predict the future in any kind of sensible, realistic way and have come close will be Minority Report. A lot of the stuff in that really is starting to happen in terms of gesture control. That's become a reality. The displays and just moving something from one display to the other, just casting it across, that really is becoming a reality. Targeted advertising is definitely a reality. Whenever I log on to anything now online, I seem to be
just
targeted.
All porn and erectile dysfunction medication.
I don't know how it knows, but if you look up something on Amazon...
It's not denying it.
Everything's communicating with everything else, yeah. So your darkest little secrets are known to Google and Amazon, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I can see a day where, when he's walking through the mall and all the advertising hoardings change for him as he walks past them. I can see that happening.
Absolutely.
That's only a few years away, I think.
The only thing is that it's a nice thing in a film context to signify that, different person's eyes and all that. But if you think about how busy, well, certainly Milton Keynes shopping centre is of a normal Saturday, you'd only get 10 seconds. It just would be impossible to target it like that. Even someone standing on an escalator, there's still going to be someone on the step behind you and the step behind that and the step behind that.
Can you imagine Steve walking through there with that technology and it's all Pornhub adverts?
Yeah, browsers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're absolutely right that if you set out to predict the future, you're on a hiding to nothing. It also doesn't help that in terms of predicting, we are vastly over optimistic when it comes to predicting our developments in hardware, and massively incapable of working out where software's going. So you've got to be careful with stuff like that.
See, the thing that always interests me about these future films and predictions of the future and all the rest of it is they might have got the mobile phones right, they might have got FaceTime right, they might have got multi-channel TV correct and that kind of thing, but absolutely none of them predicted the internet.
No. But how on earth could you even begin to try and explain the internet as it is in 2016 to yourself in 1990? It existed in an embryonic sense in 1990. So you would be able to, with access to the relevant hardware, be able to show, okay, what this thing does now, but imagine it's basically able to do everything. And imagine it being so utterly sprawling that you can't turn it off. I mean, it's possibly the first machine.
Yeah, but you see, even there, though, if you're talking about sci-fi writers and so on, how come none of them actually predicted it? Because you're talking about computers talking to computers and networking and all that kind of thing. So you would have thought that the logical end goal would be, well, this is what it would be. But when you look at sci-fi writing or novels, all that kind of thing, or films and that are trying to predict the future, none of them ever got their internet bang on, or even predicted it.
Yeah, there's snippets of it in various locations. But I agree with you, but it's such a staggering step. It has so little in the way of precursor that I don't find it unusual that we have had difficulty, prior to it sort of coming into being, envisaging it. Maybe this is a mental stumbling block of mine, but I don't find it that surprising. I think give a science fiction writer a picture of a car and he'll go, well, do you know the cool thing would be to make it fly? Give him a picture of a computer as it existed, let's say with the original Apple, not the board, the original Mac thing. Could you go look at that, look at what it did, and go and then envisage the online environment as it now is, accessible from a myriad set of devices and so on and so forth. It is, it's easy to criticize, but it's as I say, it has so little in the way of, precursive sort of thinking that, it's pretty radical stuff. I mean, it's like CFAX, but better.
The scary thing for me is that, going back, like you say, go back 25 years and think of where you were and what you were doing and so on, and then where you are now. And think of how many people actually make a living now from something that didn't exist 25 years ago.
And will be the case in 25 years' time.
Well, what will be there in the next 25 years? How will it develop? Will it still be the thing that it is now? It's like that's mind-boggling. Mind you, Trump's in power, so we've only got the next 4 years to look forward to.
If you want to look at films predicting the future, you want to look at films predicting the future, I'd get on with Fury Road.
You just want that to happen so you can have a big V8 Interceptor. That's all you're interested in.
Phil, we live in the UK. Let's face it, there aren't any. There are also other problems as well. Gasoline, as delivered to a filling station near you, has a tank life of 3 months. Using extremely expensive and hard to come by chemicals, you can extend the tank life to 2 years.
I've set them off now, haven't I? I should have shut up.
You can't. Actually, do you want to know something very interesting about apocalyptic perceptions of the future?
No.
Why, in the apocalypse, is no one riding a bicycle? It's the most... No, hear me out on this. It's the most logical means of moving around a post-apocalyptic environment. It requires almost nothing.
The roads are all ruined, though. You've got nothing to ride on.
Well, you've got all-terrain... Let's face it, there is no... If I needed to find a mountain bike somewhere in the immediate vicinity around me, I could do that, no problem at all. And it wouldn't be desperately difficult to steal that sort of thing either.
I just want to see the photograph of Ed on a mountain bike.
No one... But no, hear me out on this. No one... It's a completely logical method. People are riding horses. I haven't ridden a horse this century. I hate horses. They're just cows with ambition. They're horrifying things. Unless you have a working relationship with them, they're normally pretty damn hard to ride. Whereas a bike, it's one of those things. It makes no sense at all. Why?
Well, Ed, let's be honest though. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes wouldn't look quite so cool if the apes turned up on bikes, would it?
I was more thinking, things like what's the one with more Denzel Washington and
you mean Book of Eli?
Yeah, and the Walk and things like that. The Walk would not actually be significantly altered if it was the ride, and they'd get an awful lot further down the way.
Yes, all right. I think
we've definitely got a choice of taglines there for the podcast this week.
We just put cows with ambition. Horses are just cows with ambition.
I hate horses.
I love horses.
Again, those targeted adverts, Steve, aren't getting any better for you.
Yeah. I was in terms of taking things out of context. I was going to tell Phil earlier in the week that I was planning on having a sausage party this weekend because I've got the disc to review, and I thought maybe I won't say that because out of context that could be quite iffy. I think it's true though. Going back to the original conversation, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, the internet. I think if you look at any science fiction film where they've tried to imagine some kind of network computer system, it's always been at a government or corporate level, hasn't it? It's always been like, Skynet, for example, would be a good example. A network computer system that becomes self-aware and then destroys us all. No one, I think, envisaged our life being so connected now as it is, and not just the internet, but it's a way that all, like we were saying at the beginning of the podcast, the way that every device is connected, and your kettles are connected to the internet, and your fridges and your phones and your everything, hi-fi, the lot. And that level of connectivity, I don't think anyone had quite envisaged, because I don't think you could have. And I can't think of any film. I mean, I know that in AI, there's a bit where he goes to see Dr. No, and that's basically the internet, isn't it? That's basically Google. But that was made before that had really become a big thing. I
suppose
yeah.
one thing that films were getting right is that we are now truly in the age of mega corporations with aims and ambitions far beyond what you might commonly have expected as recently as 20, 25 years ago. I mean, let's face it, Weyland-Yutani is actually whatever Elon Musk is deciding to do at any given moment. It's just not called Weyland-Yutani, and so on and so forth. And if a number of these companies actually wanted to pick a fight with a small country, it would be a debatable and interesting question as to who'd win. So, yeah, that they've sort of got right. Essentially, through various quirks, distortions, and outright failings of the modern market, we do have the rise of organisations that are outrageously powerful. Not necessarily the ones that we thought were going to be. That is one thing I do take some heart from. But that's an interesting one. But I'm still riled about bicycles. I know which one I can probably fix, and it ain't the muscle car.
And on that bombshell, that's it for this week's podcast. We're way over time. My thanks to Steve Withers.
don't think you should be digging in your ass.
And Ed Selly.
I've seen some pretty shitty situations in my life, but nothing has ever sucked more ass than this.
Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoy the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening. We made it to the end. We might have a podcast out of this, and if we do, we'll see you next week.